Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're tackling a YouTube video that's definitely sparked some interest. It's called The Origin of African According to the Bible, from the channel Unraveling the Scriptures.
Right.
It really goes straight into this question of, well, biblical origins for African peoples. And if you're curious about history, maybe some surprising connections, this is for you. We're going to unpack what the video actually puts forward.
Exactly. Our job here is really just to understand the information presented in the video. And it jumps right in, basically saying everyone, comes from Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Okay.
And specifically, it argues that Black and African peoples trace their lineage back to Ham.
So the core idea presented is, post-flood, Noah's sons repopulate the earth. Shem, they say, leads to Semitic peoples, Arabs, Jews, Syrians, that kind of group. Japheth, supposedly, is the ancestor of Europeans and Asians. And then Ham, he's presented as the key figure for Black and African ancestry.
Yeah, the video even uses the term Hamites for Ham's descendants. It lays that foundation right away. This is how the world's populations, in their view, branched out after the flood.
It's a very direct claim, isn't it? Ham equals the ancestor of African and Black peoples in this framework. And the video argues the Bible itself supports this.
It does. It points, for instance, to the Book of Psalms, specifically Psalm 78, which they interpret as placing Ham as the ancestor of the ancient Egyptians.
Okay.
And it doesn't stop there. It also brings up ancient rabbinical traditions, other Jewish historical writings, things like that, suggesting they also identified Ham this way historically.
So trying to build a case that this isn't just a modern interpretation, but something with older roots.
Seems like it, yeah. Like they're saying, look, other ancient sources saw it this way too. And interestingly, they also look at the name Ham itself.
Oh, what about the name?
The video suggests that in Hebrew and Aramaic, the name Ham could mean burned or dark. And they connect that meaning directly to, skin tone associated with his descendants. It's that kind of linguistic link they use to support the interpretation.
Right, trying to find clues in the words themselves.
Exactly. And to get more specific about who these descendants are, the video digs into Genesis chapter 10, verses 6 to 14 specifically. This is where they map out the family tree, so to speak.
Okay, let's follow that map. Who's first from Ham, according to the video?
First up is Cush. The video identifies Cush as the father of several African peoples. You get names like Havilah, Sabta, Sabteka, Rama, Sheba, and then Nimrod.
Nimrod, he's quite a famous biblical figure.
Right. And the video connects him directly to building Babel. Even suggests he was an ancestor of the Sumerians and founded cities in Assyria later on. So it's linking Ham's line through Cush and Nimrod to ancient Mesopotamia.
Wow, okay. That really stretches the geography. So after Cush, who's the next son of Ham mentioned?
That would be Mizraim. And the video is very clear. Mizraim is the ancestor of the ancient Egyptians. And they make a strong point here, noting that even today, Arabs, Jews, Syrians, others often call Egypt Mizraim. That linguistic continuity is presented as, pretty strong evidence for their view.
That persistence of the name is interesting. Does it list descendants from Mizraim too?
Oh, yeah. It gets detailed. From Mizraim come the Ludites, apparently ancestors to North African groups like the Anamites, Lehabites, Naphtuhites, Pathrusites, Casluhites.
Quite a list.
And from them, the video says, came the Philistines and Caphtorites. So yeah, a broad sweep across North Africa branching out from Mizraim.
Okay, so Cush, Mizraim, who's the third son linked to Africa.
Put, sometimes spelled P-H-U-T. The video identifies Put as the father of the native Black Libyans and other African peoples.
And any meaning attached to that name?
They suggest Put comes from a word meaning landmark, and maybe it was also used to describe tribal hunters in Africa. Again, trying to link the name to the people or region.
Okay, seeing that pattern. Now, the fourth son is Canaan. And the video makes a really sharp distinction here, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This is critical to their whole argument. They state very clearly, Canaan is not the ancestor of African peoples.
Right.
Canaan is the father of the Canaanites, a specific group in a specific place, think the Levant. The video really separates Canaan's line from the others, Cush, Mizraim, Put, who are linked to African ancestry in their view.
Why do you think they stress that separation so much?
Well, I suspect it has everything to do with the curse we'll probably get to later, to make it clear who was supposedly cursed and who wasn't.
Makes sense. Okay, before the curse then, let's just quickly recap the specific African descendants the video mentions?
Sure. So it reiterates Ethiopians come from Cush, people of Nubia, the kingdom of Cush, also Cush's descendants.
Okay.
It repeats the claim about the original Babylonians, the Sumerians, being descended from Nimrod, Cush's son.
Right, the Mesopotamian link again?
Yeah. And then it casts a wider net, suggesting populations like South Indians, Malians, Eritreans, Kenyans, Congolese, and Bantus from Gabon might also have Kushite ancestry. That's a huge area.
Definitely. It paints Cush as this major progenitor figure, according to the video. What about Mizraim again?
Mizraim, again, is ancient Egyptians and North Africans, including Berbers and the dark-skinned Tuaregs. And they circle back to the name thing, Egypt being called Mizrahi in Semitic languages, citing Psalm 78, verse 51, the tents of Ham, as biblical evidence linking Ham and Egypt.
Got it. And Put.
Put is reiterated as the father of native black Libyans and other African groups, reinforcing that landmark or hunter connection they mentioned.
Okay, so we've got this picture. Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, various African peoples, and Canaanites, separate line.
Exactly. Which brings us to maybe the most loaded part of this whole discussion.
Yeah.
The so-called curse of Ham. The video knows this is a big, often misused idea.
Yeah, it's got a really painful history, that interpretation. How does the video handle it?
It goes back to Genesis 9, the story where Noah gets drunk, Ham sees him naked, tells his brothers Shem and Japheth. The video frames Ham's action as disrespectful.
Okay, the act of telling was the issue.
That's the interpretation presented. But here's the absolute key point the video makes.
Yes.
When Noah wakes up and finds out, he doesn't curse Ham. According to the video's reading of the text, Noah curses Canaan, Ham's son.
Canaan, the one they already separated out.
Precisely, the father of the Canaanites. The video is emphatic. The curse landed on Canaan and his descendants, not on Ham himself, and not on Cush, Mizraim, or Put, the lines they trace to African peoples.
So the video directly confronts the idea that the curse applies to black people.
Oh, absolutely. It calls that interpretation a serious error and a false interpretation. Full stop. It also points out that Ham, identified as the ancestor of African and South Indian peoples, lived a very long life, saw generations come and go, just like Shem, which they argue doesn't really fit with the idea of him being under some major divine curse.
Right, trying to dismantle that specific harmful reading of the text. Does the video say much about Ham's life after the flood, beyond just his descendants?
It does. It mentions there's no certainty in Genesis about where Ham died or was buried. Different traditions guess different places: Ethiopia, Nubia, Mesopotamia, Sudan, Egypt. The geography keeps popping up.
Okay.
But then it brings in another text, the Book of Jubilee, to add more detail, as interpreted by the video's creators, of course.
The Book of Jubilee. What does it say about Ham, according to the video?
Well, according to the video's take on Jubilee, Ham wasn't happy that his youngest son, Canaan, decided to live in the land meant for Shema, the Israel area.
Interesting family conflict.
Yeah, and apparently Cush and Mizraim, Canaan's brothers, agreed with Ham. They told Canaan to leave, saying the African lands were for Ham's descendants, but the video says Canaan refused and stayed put.
It has a whole other dimension to the story. Anything else from Jubilee?
Just one more detail the video includes. It says Ham actually founded the very first city and province after the flood, and he named the city after his wife, Male Tamlock.
So far from being cursed, this paints him as a pioneer, a city founder.
Exactly. That's the picture the video aims to present through its interpretation of Genesis and Jubilee.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the video's main points then. It argues everyone comes from Noah's sons. Ham is the ancestor of diverse African peoples via Cush, Mizraim, and Put. Genesis 10 supposedly lists these connections.
Right.
And, crucially, the curse in Genesis 9 fell only on Canaan, who is positioned as a separate lineage, not on the ancestors of African peoples.
That's the core argument. It really highlights how much interpretation matters with these ancient texts, doesn't it? The layers of history, tradition, translation, it all plays a part.
It certainly does. Which kind of leaves us, and you listening, with a thought. If this one video offers such a specific reading of a foundational text like the Bible, what other stories, historical accounts, or cultural narratives that we take for granted might have equally surprising interpretations or origins just waiting to be explored? Something to think about.